graduated from the Air Force Academy. Went off immediately thereafter. I could have gone to pilot training, or I could go to graduate school in engineering at Stanford. Easy choice. I went to Stanford. Also easy because when they took me up for orientation for flying, flew out of Denver in those days, and so we flew for a while, and the pilot in the back seat sort of gave me the controls, and we were flying along fine, I thought, and he sort of said, "Everything look okay?" So I quickly scanned all the gauges and everything, and it all looked just like they said they should look, and I said, looks fine to me, sir," and he said, "Why don't you look outside?" So I did. I was upside down. They don't have a gauge for that, okay. So I figured out fairly early that perhaps I shouldn't be a fighter pilot, okay, or perhaps I shouldn't be a cargo pilot. So, so my apologies to all the aerospace students. And let's see. Then I eventually ended up teaching at the Air Force Academy for a couple of years in Colorado Springs, and while I did that, I went down to University of Colorado, Colorado Springs at night and got my MBA. And while I was doing that, the professors in those ancient days came down from Boulder to teach the evening course from the business school. So they said, "Why don't you come do your doctoral work?" So after fulfilling my commitment in the Air Force, I came up here. They gave me a bunch of things, and so I was actually making more as a graduate student here than I made as a captain in the Air Force, and came up here and did my doctoral work. After that, I went over to the East Campus to a research group that was over there that was trying to improve the management of colleges and universities, and did that for some 9 years. Every college and university in the U.S. is using some of our products. But overall, I can't say that universities are very well managed yet. So I did that. From there, I went to the state of Indiana. Anybody here been in Indiana? So you may ask, why would I ever want to go to Indiana, right? A good professional colleague friend of mine took over to be the commissioner for higher education. And he said, "Why don't you come and be my number 2 person?" So I thought so much of this fellow. He's probably the smartest person I've ever known. So I moved my family from Boulder, where I'd been living for 9 years, to Indiana. I don't highly recommend that, okay? So that was an interesting time. We approved programs for colleges. We reviewed their budgets. We oversaw the Student Aid Commission. Testified on proposed educational legislation. I wrote speeches for the governor, and eventually ended up heading that agency. We had a board of directors composed of 13 citizens from Indiana, very well-to-do citizens. A couple of those asked me to come join their companies. I took one of those up on that. This was a private holding company in Muncie, Indiana. And I then spent some 15 years with them. First assignment was a startup company, aerospace startup company, in San Carlos, California. We were developing. Remember now, this is now in the late 80s. We were developing hollow titanium airfoils for aviation, both military and commercial, using superplastic forming and diffusion bonding of titanium. That had been done for structural components, but never had been done for dynamic components. Our competition were some small companies like Pratt & Whitney and so on. The end of that story is they won. We didn't. But we did a lot of interesting technical work. And so startup companies were a real challenge. After that, still working for the same holding company, I headed up forging line of business, forges in the U.S. and in the U.K. After that, I headed up their aerospace company, an aerospace company which was repairing jet engine components for all the major airlines around the world. We had over 100 customers and had 5 plants. After that, after we sold that, I took over a small machine shop that had been a company serving our aerospace company. So it was aerospace oriented, and refocused it on the semiconductor equipment industry, which 4 out of the 5 largest companies in that area are in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And so we started that company with 40 employees doing about $4 million a year, machining in the aerospace industry, refocused it on the semiconductor equipment industry, and in the 10 years we grew that to over 900 employees, 9 plants in the U.S. and elsewhere, and doing over $200 million a year. So at that point I was tired. I also served as executive vice president and served on the board of the holding company, and as such we had computer companies, we had metallurgical testing laboratories, we had TV stations, we had all of those things. So I got involved in all of those things. In addition to that, I sat on the Indiana board of Manufacturing Association, also served on some private boards of directors. So I have a fairly broad background, which is why I enjoy teaching this course. There aren't too many of the topics that are in the textbook that I haven't had some substantial experience with.